The best baseball card from 1976 is pure nostalgia. There is a forbidden fruit hidden among the piles of vintage baseball cards stashed in corners and under beds across the United States. If you were a collector during the 1970s or 1980s, you probably heard whispers about this taboo cardboard, but you may never have seen it close up. Its simplicity and beauty was legendary, and its disregard for the rules was off-putting by the old guard of the hobby. It was the 1976 SSPC set, and its very existence continues to confound collectors and make it nearly impossible to complete simple tasks, such as choosing the best card issued in the bicentennial year. The Pure Card. All during my adolescence, I read stories and talked to older collectors about the only full-size set of Major League Baseball cards issued during the years of the Topps monopoly from 1956 through 1980. Those points of input fell into two broad categories. Those who loved the cards lauded the full-color images that dominated card fronts and the simple design that featured only black thin piping around the player photo and a plain white border. The cardstock was blazing white, in contrast to the mushy brown-gray of Topps cards, and provided an easy background for the black type on the card backs that provided biographical information. This simplicity led collectors to christen the issue the Pure Card set and gained it a sort of cult following in the hobby. Besides the sleek design, SSPC stuck it to the man, Topps, by skipping right past all the pesky things that go into making a printed product, like packaging and licensing. The set was only available directly from TCMA through a mail order offer in hobby media. Those who hated the cards pointed to many of the same attributes. They were collector issued, some quality control issues. They were unlicensed, and they had no stats on card backs. But it was that licensing bit that really stuck in the craw of old-timers and folks who looked at baseball cards as an investment. After all, there was no real external controls on what they were doing, and what would stop CCMA from just cranking up the presses again if they wanted to sell a few hundred or thousand more sets? I mean, besides the cease and desist agreement they eventually reached with Topps. Still, the cards were beautiful, especially by the standards of the day, and they have been compared to both the 1953 Bowman and the 1957 Topps issues. There are tons of great photos in the set too, and all these years later, most collectors wouldn't have any qualms about including these babies in their collections. All of which means that in the battle for the best card of 1976, SSPC poses some stiff competition for Topps. Detailed dominance. The problem for the upstart, even now, is that Topps was and is a master of their craft. And at this point, I have to admit that I've had my fair share of critical words for Topps over the years. During the 1980s, for example, it felt like they were stubbornly clinging to the old school ideas, gaudy designs, and crappy cardboard, while its competitors were improving year by year. And I was never much a fan of the 1976 Topps set in particular. It seemed drab, and the design was uninspired. But when I stepped back into the hobby a few years ago, any glimpse of the 1976s was accompanied by that familiar nostalgic twinge that makes some cards impossible to resist. My Cincinnati Reds look pretty good in their yellow and red stripes at the bottom of the cards, and with so many all-star stars for the added decorations. And that Mike Schmidt card where he's either bunting or carefully laying down his bat after a home run shot really got the collecting juices flowing again in me. It was one of the first old cards I ever owned as a kid, and it makes me feel like it's 1983 every time I see it. But it was a comment from another collector that caused me to really study the 1976 Topps cards again. In particular, he told me what he really liked was the fact that the little figurine players on the front of each card was strongly matched to the player position, all the way down to the lefty and righty pitchers. I had never noticed that before, but a quick perusal through a handful of my cards told me it was true. It also prompted me to take an even closer look at the cards. The photos really weren't that bad, at least not by 1970 standards, and for some of them, they were quite good. Steve Garvey, Steve Carlton, Tom Seaver, Dusty Baker, and many others put me in a set-building mood. And the card backs, while basic, are very baseball-y. The ball and the bat on the left-hand side set the tone for the standard Topps Vital Stats and Baseball Stats layout, and the cartoon at the bottom of some of the cards is always a fun addition. The color scheme is solid too, with Phil green dominating and brown accents adding to the game feel. And when you put all those elements together, I can't turn my back on the Topps base set, no matter how pretty SSPC may be. But which is the best? Ah, now that's the real question. Which is the best Topps baseball card issued in 1976? Even narrowed down to one company, it's a tough choice. The best card would need to satisfy some basic criteria: strong photo, pleasing colors, good design element, and bonus points if it's a star player. Most of these are straightforward, if subjective, but the issue of design elements is sticky. I really like the All-Star on these cards, which is not usually the case, but here it makes the card sparkle just a bit more. But I also really like the targeted player icon that the star obliterates. It's a tough choice, and you can see good examples of each with probably my favorite two cards in the set, Schmidt and Johnny Bench. But those guys are A, Mike Schmidt, and B, a Cincinnati Red, and I'm trying to cut down on both. There's a whole big cardboard world out there beyond my favorite player and my favorite team. In the end, I really only want to see one of those little player statuettes on any card that is labeled best. So the best baseball card issued in 1976 was 1976 Topps, Dave Parker. Here are a few of the reasons that the Cobra comes out on top. Parker somehow wasn't an all-star in 1975, so he gets an outfielder shagging down a fly ball instead of a star. Check. The green and yellow color scheme, while not perfect for the Pittsburgh Pirates, is still solid from a baseball perspective. Check. Parker is/was a superstar. Check. The photo is a rare action shot for Parker, who always seems to be warming up or leaning on a batting cage in his cards. Check. It also doesn't hurt that Big Dave was the best player on the Reds in the middle 1980s. Baby steps. You couldn't go wrong picking any one of maybe 50 different baseball cards as the best of 1976, maybe even some of the fabled SSPC set. But if this exercise has reminded me of anything, it's that exotic doesn't always mean better. Sometimes the real gems turn out to be the dusty rocks you've been carrying in your pocket all along.